Want the shout outs also? So
Yeah,
you can
it's
start.
done.
Alright. Hi everyone, Divyansh, him, Prime Minister, PY Fanne. However, quick shout out before I start. I think firstly to Secret That's All. Love that That's All. Shout out to Hindu and Mikey That's All and my partner. Couldn't have hoped for a better first AP finals. Alright, wonderful. And yeah, to everybody else in the room, love you so much. Thank you. Alright, great.
Tax?
None, 720. Starting my speech in 3.
Where is the timer? Did you make a phone? Are you timing yourself?
Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. I think I just want to clarify to you what a long life looks like and what a short life looks like. I think fairly simple, fairly intuitive, low-hanging fruit. A long life would be something which is 70 years odd. Short life would be something which is 30 to 35. At that point of time, I think the main thing in this debate is what is excitement and what is stability. What do I prove to you on excitement then? I think 3 things which I want to talk about. A, I think excitement is something which is inherently subjective. That's to say, it is innate to an individual and something which is personal at all points of time. That's to say, yes, sure, some narratives regarding excitement exist symmetrically, but there are certain biochemical impulses which are literally personal to me. That's to say, if I engage in a certain activity, something gets activated and I literally derive satisfaction from it. But B, there's some sort of psychological gratification which I get from engaging in certain acts at all points of time. And I realize that, oh my god, I'm receiving certain catharsis from this. But C, I might have sociological conditioning which is symmetric on both sides. But the key difference is that on their side, insofar as they're talking about stability, I think that's something which is far more unitary or homogenizing at all points of time. That's to say that, yeah, different communities still exist, but the idea of stability is inherently, a monolith at all points of time. So I'm still probably a product of my society, a product of my interactions with people, but there is no superstructural idea of stability which I'm forced to opt into on their side of the paradigm. But B, what else do we have on happiness? I think it's something which is emanating from a principle of choice. Please note that on your sheets, right? And it's a sense of control. That's to say that I have a say in doing which I want as an individual at all points of time. That is to say that excitement probably comes from you actualizing your passions better, which is literally rooted in these 3 impulses which I talk about. But more importantly, I think, yeah, sure, even a short and exciting life, insofar as like 30 years long, is probably going to have its ups and downs. But I think that is still fine on a comparative, because this was something I willingly engaged in. This is not a paradigm which was coerced onto me, and I'm going to prove to you why stability is something which is necessarily coerced. But I think C, just to mitigate ideas that, oh my god, I want to kill people and maybe that's how I derive enjoyment, I think the idea is that anchors exist on both sides of the paradigm, right? That's to say, systems of law, policing, justice, etc. are symmetric at all points of time. Narratives probably still criminalize murder at all points of time. So I'm not going to be conditioned to liking stuff which is like as shitty as that at all points of time. What is stability then? I think stability is something which is necessarily dictated by the superstructure and is something which actively compromises our individual agency at all points of time, right? That's to say, it's capitalism which is telling you that, oh my god, you need to live your life for the pursuit of money. That you necessarily need to engage into a 9-to-5 job because that is what economic stability looks like. It looks like me regularly investing in certain investment schemes or plans at all points of time, because that is how I literally guarantee my family's safety. But I think secondly, it also looks like the community telling you something, right? Like, okay, you need to follow certain tenets in order to, be a good, effective, functioning human being. It's religion telling me that, oh my god, you need to do certain things to literally be this, be a good Hindu or be a good Muslim. It looks like my family telling me that you necessarily need to literally, go and leave about your agency as an individual in order to ensure preservation at all points of time. But I think thirdly, it's also political structures like the nation state, which instill and literally indoctrinate ideas of duty and responsibility in me at all points of time. That is necessarily what stability is at all points of time. But I think B, on a comparative, it is something which is homogenizing, right? That's to say that at the international level, there's probably going to be a Christian capitalist idea of what stability looks like. At a national level, in let's say India, there will be a Hindu idea of what morality looks like at all points of time, and ensuring what this stability looks like at all points of time. And at the communitarian level, I think literally all the mech which I give to you regarding capitalism, community, nation state literally stands, and these then actively control me and inhibit me from realizing my desires, because stability is something which is necessarily privileged at all points of time. That being said, why is it necessarily bad? And this is so important. Life is suffering.
Here.
At which point, having an exciting life is a prior to stability. What do I mean by that? A couple of things here. 4 important pieces, and I think this is going to give us the debate. A, there's something known as the lottery of birth. I don't have a choice what family I'm born into, but more importantly, I don't have a choice into being born. That is to say, if you don't really have any agency coming into this world, right? Because your parents literally decided, oh my god, we're very attracted to each other, let's sleep together, and you literally pop out the next day at all points of time. That's to say, the very act of coming into this world is something which is coerced onto us, and there's a lack of consent from me as an actor at all points of time. How do I find meaning in this life? I think let's go to Kierkegaard then, right? You realize value by acting on your agency at all points of time. But I think secondly then, and this is also important, we live in an unequal world. An unequal world which is necessarily dividing us at all points of time, which literally goes ahead and inhibits us at all points of time. I think this happens in like 5 different ways. It looks like literally economic inequality. That's to say some people are more privileged than others at all points of time. It also looks like political inequality, which looks like some people being literally more privileged in structures of power at all points of time. It looks like social inequality, which looks like certain communities having an advantage. It looks like legal inequality, where people literally have access to systems of justice at all points of time. It also looks like technological inequality, etc., etc. I'm just going to preempt Sehaj's POI here, because he's probably going to say that, oh my god, you live in an unequal world, so maybe stability is important at all points of time. But the idea is that our subjective epistemes and our subjective life experiences necessarily then also change what sort of excitement we derive. That is to say, a privileged person might derive excitement from a Bali trip, but somebody who's very poor, is literally poor as fuck, probably derives excitement from just going to the temple or something like that. POI.
If excitement still has to be bound by societally created narratives like going to jail is bad, then how are you actually exercising your
Wonderful. Agency? The idea then becomes just on weighing, stability is more coercive. Excitement, yes.
In the back. Pragyansh going hello. I'll do shoutouts later. Yeah, last. Starting speech. Also POIs whenever I think. Starting speech. In 3, 2, 1, 2 call-outs right off the bat. I think one, the nature of just a stable life doesn't mean that it has to be boring. Which means that all points of time, even within a stable life, you can go ahead and seek out active experiences which are interesting to your nature, but the nature of those experiences won't be as erratic in nature. Because no one at a point in time they're seeking extremely thrilling experiences in their side of the world. The manifestation of these experiences is likely going to be in a bad way, and that's what we're going to prove in this debate. But second, I think insofar as the proof that agency is more in their world, that's based on the underlying assumption that people go ahead and exercise agency outside of societal bonds on their world. Which simply means on our world itself and even on their world on the comparative, people and their choices are at all points of time dictated by these societal bonds, even when it's like the circumstance that you're going ahead and acting out of these societal bonds, right? Which means even in their world, even if you go ahead and actively seek out these experiences, these will be harmful, but secondarily, these will be experiences which are still bound by societal norms. But how is agency exercised more in our world, right? You simply have more time. Insofar as we are living a life which is probably just more in terms of the amount of time that you live, I think you're able to exercise agency better because one, you're seeking good experiences, but second, even if these experiences are not erratic, you're able to go ahead and just derive utility out of this, right? And I think that becomes a big point within this debate. Couple of things within framing first. A short, exciting life versus long, stable life, right? And this is something that they do in the first speech as well. One, on a long, stable life, I think this dictates every facet of your life to begin with, which means probably the economic decisions that you take or other circumstances, probably careers that you choose, etc., are probably stable. But note, a short, exciting life also means that you're seeking thrilling experiences, right? The problem with that, inherently and exclusively which exists in their world, is that you bounce off from one thing to another, which means you're never able to derive the end cause utility within their world because you're always taking short experiences or experiences which you derive utility out of. Which means today if I probably just have utility from Russ, I'll bounce off to the next thing. This is problematic because you're never able to gain the end conclusion within their world. But secondarily, the manifestation of this is likely to be bad. Why is that true? Note, on a metric that you're probably going ahead and opting into different circumstances, you run out of alternatives to opt into. This simply means at a point in time you've opted into every single fucking exciting thing at the end you're just running out of good things to opt into, which means you end up risking your lives, etc., or just entering into circumstances which are bad, which means that all bunch of time you indulge in harmful things, etc., probably drugs, etc. But note crucially, our impact is not that drugs or doing drugs is inherently bad. Our impact is that the intensification of the bad experiences which then compound is bad, right? And that's what I'll frame out to you. But second, why is bouncing off bad, right? And I think I have a couple of reasons for this. The inherent intuition and the frame for this is that humans seek meaning and purpose at all points of time within their lives. Why is this extremely important? One, you can exclusively achieve meaning and purpose insofar as you're spending a larger time of life and you're just going ahead and striving towards a particular thing. But three exclusive reasons for this. One, evolutionary mechanisms, right? One, I think at all points of time you're able to just go ahead and hoard resources better insofar as you're living a larger period of life, right? Which means that your capacity increases insofar as you're able to spend more time doing this. Two, narrative coherence, right? Which means at all points of time you're able to then subjectively dictate that what your place within the world is insofar as life is generally meaningless, as they frame out to us, right? Because you're probably just on a rock floating in somewhere. But thirdly, I think communities are formed on the basis of this sort of coherence which is there, right? Which means that at all points of time, the way a community moves forward and the way you interact with the community is derived out of the experience that you have and derived out of the long-termistic experience where you seek meaning and purpose, right? But what is the necessary comparative then? And why can't meaning be achieved in their world? Two reasons. One, I've already framed out to you why you bounce off of different things and you're not able to derive utility out of that. But that also causes an effect on the grid. I'll take that to you later. But note secondarily, the short-termistic at all points of time. Thirdly, the internalization differs for different experiences, right? And this is where I flip their case on diminishing marginal utility. I think crucially note that the internalization of good and bad experiences are different. Why is this true? Insofar as you're going ahead and experiencing good things on a compounding basis, even if it's probably just experiences which are exciting, right? I think the way you then internalize those good things is different, which means if I probably just feel good about entering this finals today, I'll probably not feel as good entering the finals tomorrow, or probably just feel bad when I'm able to lose the finals in the near future, right? But secondarily, this refers to bad experiences in a certain way. Why is this different? I think at all points of time, I'm not indifferent to pain, which means at a point in time, I'm probably caused more pain. I don't feel as resistant to pain as possible. This is simply true because of the fact that my evolutionary mechanisms kick in, and at all points of time, I have to cause an active opposition to the pain that I'm caused. This is true because of the fact that when I'm not causing that active opposition to the pain I'm caused, I'm not developing or the resistance or the capacity to then go ahead and enact the sort of feeling of going ahead and turning out pain, right? But before I move ahead, I'll take a few.
Even if you bounce from one thing to another, you eventually reach a point where you've exhausted everything, knowing that you did everything that you could have done, which means you're still happy when you die and you don't have regrets on outside of the house contributing to.
But that simply means that if you're bouncing off of different things in different aspects of your life, you don't reach to an end conclusion at all, because when you reference back to a particular thing, you're not able to reference back to one single thing. That is an important metric within this debate, right? But second, on guilt and utility. Let's prove and let's assume that at all points of time, you're able to derive absolute utility out of the experience that you experience and you live, right? But it's bad for guilt and relationships within this debate, and this is extremely important. Note one, I probably feel good about doing drugs because it gives me good experiences, because I feel good about myself, because I feel light, and this finance is stressing me out. But secondarily, even if I do drugs and I gain bad experiences out of that, I have a more inherent, way the way this internalization pans out, right? Which means, at a point in time I'm doing drugs consistently, probably for the first time feel very good. Probably the second time I don't feel as good, probably 15 months down the line I don't feel anything at all, right? But the way this sort of internalization then happens is when I interact with my external structures, because my relationships, etc., are dictated by all the actions that I do. Which means when my mother sees that I'm doing drugs and my
First to Venki Depsop. Next to my teammates, Divyansh and Yuvraj, amazing debaters, but even better so to that. To my junior Ayush Hans, who broke, it was his first time breaking as a also the juniors, Hindu Depsop, Mohit, Sanchita. Also to OC, amazing tournament. And last shout out also to the opponents. One of the first tournaments that I did was SRDF. They were in finals there. Never expected to debate against you guys. Okay. I'm going to start in 10. I'll start with the next one.
Did you press record?
Yeah, it's recording. Okay. Taps. No taps last just towards the end. Tap me out. Starting speech in 3, 2, 1. The first thing I'm going to prove is why the comparative of living 70 years of your life is just far, far worse, and why life being suffering is just magnified on their side of the house. The second thing I'm going to prove is just prove a comparative. The first thing to know is that you do a lot of stupid stuff that's really not needed in your life when you live a long and stable life. Stuff like marriage, which is an institution that's forced onto you to believe that you need this in order to survive because, till the end of time or eternity you need to live. Kids that you need to have and take on additional financial burden because that's something that society dictates on you. That's literally how the health insurance system works, how the education system works. All of the norms of capitalism that are pushed down your throat, as a result of which we are made to believe that the vacation that you need to take Bali is going to take 10 years for you to accumulate that kind of wealth, contrary to you probably taking a job of a teacher in Japan and backpacking across the world if you wanted to with that menial amount of money. The issue is there are additional responsibilities that are being shunned down on your throat in the comparative that is the status quo by external institutions such as religion that are telling you to not do this, not do that, by society, marriage, like education and whatnot, as a result of which a lot of time is wasted. What you end up doing is doing stupid things such as investing into FDs and fixed deposits that are going to mature 50 years down the line because your grandparents are going to have a good thing out of it. The issue is this: you come into this world alone when you didn't have the choice, and you're going to leave it alone with nobody with you like that's what the absolute is. Religion tells you that there's heaven, so there's some sort of redemption, which means the likelihood for the average reasonable voter this probably looks like you being told that you need to partake in revolutions to get some sort of catharsis out of this, or you being told that you need to opt into like this 9 to 5 job because capitalism benefits out of this if you're just working over there and making Excel sheets at the end of the day. You lose out on time when you move to work from place A to place B, 2 hours commuting from Noida to fucking Gurgaon because there's a corporate office over there. There's time being lost that could be invested elsewhere, which means at that point in time there's just like limited utility that you derive out of it. On the comparative, then on our side of the house, we think yes. So your agency on comparative maybe is a little, how do I put it? So yes, you don't want to go to jail, but that's a trade-off you're willing to make if the frequency of the utility that you're deriving out of your actions is more consistent. What I mean by that is that you're not going to do something such as consume a lot of drugs or go out and kill people because that's going to bar you from attaining that kind of utility because this is a short life. So if it's 30 to 35 years of your life, you'd want to maximize that, which means you're probably not going to engage in stuff like murder, etc. because these anchors exist which will deter you from doing that. So short and exciting life is me not chilling and making a spin-off Orange is the New Black in jail. It's probably deriving a lot of new experiences from outside. Divyansh frames this out to you. So our innate talents or something that we are inclined towards, when I hear somebody play music or dance when I'm a kid, and the fact that I wanted to probably be a dance teacher, but that's something that I defenestrate when I am induced with these ideas of capitalism or whatnot. The next thing I'm going to do is just weigh this on 2 things. First, what is the value of pleasure that they derive on their side of the house and why it's better on our end? And second, why the capacity to derive pleasure is just more on our side of the house. The first thing I'm going to do is just weigh the value of pleasure. Because I agree, the utility of life is how happy you are probably at the end of the day. The issue is this: they are right. This probably does not need to be boring throughout. So, which means you probably take a vacation once in 4 years, saying, and you end up procrastinating it by saying, oh, I'm going to live 70 years anyway, so I'm going to do it next year, I'm going to do it next year. But in those other 360 days, what ends up happening is you going and doing a lot of grunt work, which has literally no meaning when you're feeding data into Excel sheets, when you're being told that this is a good thing because your children are going to benefit or get the better end of the stick as a result of it. As a result of, so which means the kind of investment that you're doing needs to outweigh all of the trauma that is being pushed onto you for the the rest of the 360 days that are happening over there. So sure, you are bouncing from one thing or the other on our side of the house, as a result of which there's probably some exhaustion that's reached, but it's still better than the comparative because you know you've done everything that you could have. But also it's a little uncharitable because the world is amazingly complex with new places that you could visit and new experiences that you could imbibe yourself with. Which means if I drink a blue cocktail today and I drink a yellow one tomorrow and I just feed myself with new experiences, I still think there's some utility I can derive out of it. The example they use is of a debate tournament. Notice this is the status quo. The fact is, if you believe that there's some sort of diminishing utility of you reaching a finals, there's not. There are people that continue to debate because the thrill of reaching a finals is just as great as it was the first time. It's to reaffirm that everything I stood for actually means something. Which means at that point in time, I don't think that stands. The next thing I'm going to do is talk about the capacity to derive pleasure, because if they yellow dump this on us. Listen, the thing is this. You can probably work on our side of the house as well. The issue is, the trade-off we're willing to take is that you're probably working in a cafe for 4 months, you save money, and then you decide, you know what, I want to travel in Tamil Nadu or do something like that. And you know what, I want to rear chickens because that is what my true calling is, or something like that. We think the utility that you end up deriving as a result of that act is just way more than whatever is being pushed onto us from that side of the house. Which means the frequency with which I'm able to derive pleasure is just so much more on our side of the house. Before that,
when you opt out of the conceptual structures of religion, etc., does your mother also opt out with you?
doesn't matter. So the issue is, I live a life thinking that I'm going to appease my parents. That's why I gave NEET. I did not crack it, by the way, for 2 years. I opt into a system because I'm told that giving JEE and opting into corporate structure is probably that's going to bring me happiness. But then I'm 60 and I realized, you know what, that one painting that I made when I was 11 years old was probably my true calling, and that is something that I should have pursued from the get-go. So sure, parents, etc. I think all of these are inhibitions that are being targeted onto us by society and don't really matter at the end of the day. Also, the average person, for them, familial structures are not the best. Parents are not the best. They push their aspirations onto you. Your kids, you end up pushing your aspirations onto them. The reason why so many kids have bad lives is because you yourself have unfulfilled lives. Which means on the comparative, then I think the weighing on this is simple. We think the value that you have of pleasure is just so much more frequent, and the utility that you're able to derive out of this is more on our side of the house than theirs. We think even the capacity that you have to sort of derive this pleasure is peak. I will buy the bullet. You probably don't earn a lot of money, but we don't see the point of earning that much money if it means that you, for the 360 days of your life, you're not doing anything with it. Lastly, on to agency, we think there's limited agency that you have in the world. We think that agency is way more coerced in their side of the house when all of these superstructures are telling you to opt into something that you don't derive value from. And they cannot say that I am okay with that one promotion that I'm getting or whatever, because the point is it saturates. So after a point, it's the same thing that you're doing again and again, and the value that you derive out of that one action of working in the office again stagnates and is not able to compound over time, which is exactly why for the average person, the end life or when you're about to die is not as much. So panel, just vote for the side that's happy, vote for that.
Start. Just quick shout out to Pragyansh. I think him and his entire batch, him and Rhetorque especially, have busted their ass for the last 3 months. I have seen them after every tournament where they're disappointed of not breaking, finally getting a very solid break at Manzar last week.
Let's go.
I'm very glad to see them put in the effort, and I hope they just go pretty high from here. So, yeah. Starting speech in 3, 2, 1. Pratha says a very interesting thing to end a speech. He says we are okay with earning less money, but the problem is you can never work in a cafe in Peru when you have less money. So the realistic extension of their life means that you don't go into stable jobs and you keep bouncing off things, you never have the financial stability either. So you might have one time you'll crack a very good deal and earn like a lakh of rupees, right? But you'll have massive times that you'll have no money in your hands. The problem is, the enactment of your choices then are often been bad structured. You can never make good choices of working in a very good cafe, meeting very, very good people, because you also meet very, very pathetic people and criminals at all point of time when you have very less economic resources. The problem with them is that Pragyansh proves to you that the good things happening in your life often don't feel as good when you go along in life. But the bad thing keeps feeling worse. The reason for that is very, very simple, right? When you feel good stuff at all points of time, you get used to the happiness it gives you. So you start expecting more. The problem with the bad shit is, I have this intrinsic drive in me that when I get hurt, I want to make it feel better. But when my capacity to feel better reduces, I feel worse about being in that position at all points of time. Which is why when things go shit, they really go really, really bad for me, because I often internalize it. What is internalization looks like? I often go and look at my choices. What did I do in the last 3 months to end up in this place? The most primary reaction at that point in time is self-blame, because I feel that my erratic decisions have led me to go be in a position where I have to interact with criminals here. Pratha's right, I might go from this situation as well to being happy tomorrow. But if we prove to you that happiness does not mean as much as to you, these lower points in life actually affect you a lot more. And that's important for a value judgment on the type of life you necessarily have. This is where I want to have a very clear extension of a relationship and why they necessarily are much worse on their side. If I've proven to you that society judges you, shit happens, things go wrong. You know what's important at that point of time? To have someone who you can fucking call and have them like with you, listening to your rants and be that support system at all points of time. I have one simple reason for this. We think society judges you at all points of time. It's going to judge you on their side, it's going to judge you on ours. But the problem is, to be very exciting, you have to constantly break societal barriers. That means the potential of the society to judge you keeps increasing with every decision you take. Why is this true? Because Pragyansh proves to you, to get more and more excitement, you have to keep breaking these barriers higher and higher. That means the backlash you get from society at all points of time is very massive. What is the problem then? There's a threshold to the limit as to what your support structures can judge you. Your mother can be fine with the first time you're taking drugs, can probably be fine the second time she finds you in the back of cigarette. But there's going to be an eventuality where she can't take it and has to cut ties with you when it just never ever enough. You know what the problem is? That's the specific time when you have no one in your goddamn life. That means when shit happens, which are going to happen on either side, they do not have anybody they can call, because the threshold of this limit to what your support structures can necessarily support you is constantly having to be broken on their side, where it doesn't have to be broken on ours. What is the comparative on relationships though? We think one, relationships takes time and effort to develop. The only response they have it, we don't care if you don't have your mother. But society does, right? You need to have a support structure. They never prove to you that you don't have a need to have somebody in life. They often say we don't care. But problem is, if society fucks you up, that's the specific time you need it. You don't need it in good situations, you need it in bad. If you prove bad situations are much more worse, that means you specifically require support structure. More on the positive now. One, when you opt into a stable life, you often don't have to break societal barriers to the maximum of degrees. Even if you take small decisions people hate, you can still have time in your life. Second, you don't have to take erratic decisions, which means if I'm in a stable life, like the worst case, right? I work in fucking Deloitte, right? But I still have the opportunity to visit my mother every week because I still have those 2 days off. What that means is I can go to a cafeteria with my mother and take her out on her birthday. What that means is I have enough time and incentive to go and develop a stronger bond with my support structures, like my mother, like my girlfriend who's leaving next week. All these are specific situations in life which I can opt into and develop very strong bonds with them. What is the necessary impact on our side, right? This allows me to have good relationship with individuals over a long period of time. Let's bring in agency here, because I have a fun point on agency. They said we can constantly break barriers and have more and more agency. With age, you have more free time to enact agency. If I have to work till 50, I can eventually retire at 55. I have a lot of time then to keep enacting this agency. But the value of that agency is much bigger on our side. One, because we don't have to break societal norms. I have agency in acting buying the biggest car out there and feeling very good about it. Society does not judge me there. They probably are jealous, but they never judge me at that point of time. Who's happy when I buy that big car? My fucking mother, who I kept in touch with for the past 40 years. If I don't keep in touch with her, she will not be there to celebrate those moments within me. Which means at all points of time, I'm left individualized and selfish, but I never have the support system which I need. But secondly, and most importantly, right, for agency. The problem is, when you enact agency, you often require resources, you often require time, you often require support structures. All these things are only going to happen in a place where you have time given to all these things to develop all of them. When we work for 40 years, we have a large amount of resource pool which we can develop, which means I can save and get a lot of utility from that one-time holiday I might have. On their side, when I keep going to different places, even if I go to Peru and Cambodia and all those things, utility that I derive from these places and the experiences keep subsequently going down with each visit. Which means if the trade-off is one fucking holiday, but with all the might, it's better because one, you can have people you love along with you, but two, society doesn't judge you on those decisions, POI.
Wonderful. If I derive excitement from my mother, then on both sides, I'll probably still go ahead and spend time with my mother. On your side, the relationships are necessarily forced.
Threshold argument, right? She's going to be okay with your bad decisions once a couple of times, and they already take the trade-off. Not that they do bad decisions or doing drugs, etc. I don't have to compete this. They've already proven this to me. But secondly, I think the feel of enacting is very important. If I take decisions which the society makes me feel is bad, then I don't feel good about that agency. That's the premise they miss. They're right. I concede. They have more agency to break barriers, right? One, I wanted to imagine this. Society creates crime and legal structures. If you still have to be bound by them, you can never fully break these shackles, right? Because you're going to be bound by larger things. You're going to be bound by larger things. I don't probably want to get arrested. I don't want to die. They say self-preservatory mechanisms. Which means agency is never fully broken. But then what's the nuance here, right? If you can never break agency fully, it's better to break agency with a limitation which can make you still feel happy during those small moments when you get them, versus feeling very big highs but very big lows as well. If we prove to you that you never feel as good about yourself because you're constantly breaking barriers, that means the utility you can derive out of that happiness is very, very limited in comparison. In essence, what have we proven to you? One, we think you're able to develop very stronger support structures at all points of time, which I think are required on both ends. They can't now go and flip their cases and say, no bad situations happen. If they do, we can get a consistency mechanism on opposition, which ensures you have the support structures which you need. But secondly, we tell you that a stable life ensures you have experiences which still give you happiness, but you're never judged for it. But lastly, they just say we're okay not having children. But the point is, if I do want to opt into having children, I can. And the benefit I can derive, growing the child takes time. But when I can grow that child and that child goes to college, the feeling I have is non-judgmental. It's very, very pure. And it's a good feeling because nobody judges me for it, and I can see the end product of the process I took place in. I grew that child up along with my partner, and I can see him nurtured into being a good individual. That process is missing in 30 years. On 70 years, you have these newer experiences without judgment. Very proud to take this debate.
Thank you, DLO.
Alright, so my name is Dhruv, prefer pronounce he/him. I'll take one POI, after 9:30 you can verbalize, I won't take it before. Starting my speech. In 3, 2, 1, and go. The problem with government's case.
Wait, stop.
Sorry. Alright. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1, and go. The problem in government's case is that they prove incentive to have experiences, but they don't prove material capacity in the first place to begin with. Let's be really clear, and I have a lot of responsive material. First, when you're young, your material capacity is limited because you don't have a degree, you don't have a job. So your capacity to get any sort of regular employment or any sort of alternatives is inherently less. Second, your wealth is limited because wealth takes time to develop because of the fact that you need larger FDs for you to actually grow that wealth in the first place. If you're a young person, your economic capacity to develop that wealth is lesser because you have been on earth for lesser time to begin with. But third, your capacity to ask for this wealth from others is also lesser because other people are only willing to lend me money if I have a stronger long-term connection with them. So my parents will loan me money if I love them and if they love me back. My friends will loan me money if I have a long-term friendship with them. In their side of the world, if I'm focusing on short-term friendship, the capacity to lend me money is going to be really, really less to begin with. Why is that bad? This is bad because systemic barriers actually exist in their side of the world to begin with. Which is to say, if I am born in a poor area which has rampant unemployment, I don't have the capacity to go work in a cafe which provides me fulfillment in the first place. But second, if I'm born in an area which has poor resources, I'm stuck within that area. This is why cycles of poverty exist. This is why if I'm like a child of a parent who was a plumber, I also become a plumber because I don't have the capacity to get good education first, but I don't have the capacity to exercise my choices in the first place to begin with. So their experiences are contingent on me having the material wealth to exercise those experiences in the first place. Why is that bad? That's bad because in their side of the world, what happens? Notice, when you don't have the material capacity to go trek to Mount Everest, you don't have the capacity to go trekking in Cuba, what do? You look out for experiences and addictions which are the most accessible to you, which are the most cheapest to you. This is why poorer communities in areas which don't have a lot of growth rely on drug addiction and weed. It's not that they want to, it's that they don't have any sort of alternative mechanisms available for them to in the first place. This is why even if they prove that probably a rich individual can probably go to Cuba and start a trekking cafe, if I'm a black individual in a poorer neighborhood, I have to rely on weed because I don't have other sources of having this experience in the first place. But I take the best case scenario. Sure, experiences look like me having the capacity to travel. Why is that bad? That's bad because people feel guilty. If I'm poor, if I don't have the capacity to go get those experiences, I also intensely feel this guilt because I cannot justify and lead a good life in their side of the world to begin with. Pure.
Alright, second, why is choice a lot better in our side of the world? I have a lot of metrics for that. Notice, choice has inherently no value. Choice has value when you have the material capacity to exercise that choice. Why is that better in our side of the world? When you are 35 years old, that's where your real life starts. Because you are secure in your job, you have reached middle management, you have become your own boss, so you have to work lesser hours. But second, your FD has started to give you dividends, so you have the money to earn and the money to actually go to vacations in the first place to begin with. This is why our life is better. When you actually retire, those are the golden years of your life, because you have compounded your wealth significantly throughout your career, throughout your degree. That means your agency to exercise that choice only unlocks when you have the material wealth to exercise that choice to begin with. This is why we are logically prior to their side. Their side assumes you get experiences because you have capacity. Our side proves you get capacity on a longer term when you actually work hard on the 9 to 5 job to exercise your agency later and get that money later in the first place. What do we get on a comparative? Probably you have to work hard till 35, 40. When you become secure in your career, that's better because you can start taking trips with your family. You can have fun with your family. And by the way, their point is, oh, dreams are individualistic. When I have families, my dreams change. Because it's not that I have my individual passions anymore. The fact I'm able to provide for my family gives me meaning in and of itself to begin with. It becomes an end to itself, and it's not something that I seek within my passion, and that's why it's really important to begin with. But second, oh, my mother probably understand that and expectations will increase. This is why it's important. First, there's probably a threshold to which she is even like willing to accept that to begin with. Because even if your mother loves you, she still has certain expectations from you. This is why it's important. Probably in the short term, she understands that, oh, my son is just like stupid, he's like trying to have fun. But in the long term, she'll start to realize that you are not there for her, that you are not there for her within her problems, that you are not meaningfully present in her life. She has problems, you're not there, you're not willing to solve those problems. So in the long term, you start to lose out on your coping mechanisms. But second, the thresholds of relationships and friends is even lower. Even if my mother accepts me, my friends won't accept me, my girlfriend would accept if I don't spend time with her. Even if they prove that mother's relationship probably doesn't get that bad, if other relationships become worse off, that's also a really bad trade-off in their side of the world to begin with. But let's actually weigh happiness and why is it so much better off in our side. First, notice in our side of the world, we have frequency of happiness. Because if you're content in your life, that's better because on a frequency metric, you always have that. In their side of the world, you feel intense emotions. You're either sad, you're either happy. Why is that bad? Bad shit, like crazy things can happen on either side of the world. Where do I have more capacity to cope with those things? When I'm struggling in my life, when I'm really, really sad in my life, I want to talk to my friends. I want to talk to my girlfriend. Which means if in their side of the world, the capacity for things to go bad is higher because the risk is higher, because I'm probably having worse, riskier investments, I can also go bankrupt within those investments. So the risk is always higher in their side of the world. When things go bad, I don't have any sort of coping mechanisms to.
In 3,
2,
1. I want you all to ask a very basic question to yourself from their case. What does the meaning of exciting? Because it keeps changing very conveniently in their speeches, right? Because they start by saying that there are institutions which push restrictions on me. We need to break those shackles and break free from it. Fair. But the problem is, let's take drugs for example, because that's the most prominent thing, right? The first thing they say is it's fine because you know what, you have to keep doing it. But then they conveniently also say in their third speech that things like drugs, because they're illegal, we're never going to opt into. We're also not going to do things which are going to take me away from my mother, etc. These are very intuitive and very intuitive status quo. But gut check this. If you are not even going to fucking do drugs on their side, then what you're going to do are often things which we anyways do on our side. Because they're within the institutional barriers which are created and artificially created. This is the problem on their side. All their mechanisms are not exclusive. Because if they're not ready to take the worst and highest burden of saying you'll break every possible barrier, even if there's a risk of going to jail, then all pleasures you derive are fucking symmetric in the debate. Because we can also take a holiday after every 3 months. The world is liberal enough to give me 2 days break for fuck's sake. But also secondly, the relationship thing is also funny. There's also a tension here. Pratha's response to my POI is, which is actually a fairer one, to say, we don't care about the mother. But then the whip's entire weighing is on the why the mother will not leave anyways. You can have to choose one case, you can't run both. But I'll tell you why we beat both anyways. First, there is a threshold of expectation which everybody has, and we argue this. Your mother will have a higher threshold because she's your mother. She'll love you unconditionally and all those things. But there is a fucking barrier where that will stop because everybody's love relationship has some expectation. But even forget mother. We tell you other support structures are also important because when bad shit crazy things happen, you require your friends and support structure. These people have a lower barrier. Why? Because everybody is not opting into a short and exciting life. Only you are. That means they are still operating under the very institutions and the religion and the expectations of friendship and lifelong things and all those things. Which means their threshold is lower. That means we are substantially able to prove to you, until unless you're able to give time, effort, money, support to all these people, you are never ever going to get anything in return. The problem is, they never explain why you don't need them. They try and contest why you're going to have them regardless. If they don't beat this premise, or why there's a threshold at every relationship, they can't co-opt that benefit to the same degree at any point of time. But thirdly then, on capacity. This is so important in this debate, right? Because again, there's tension here as well. On the first two speeches, they want to explain why we can do everything, travel around the world. But where's the money? Like, how the fuck are you earning money to travel to Paris? Tell me about it as well, right? Because we think there are restrictions anyways. On both sides, you will earn some amount of money. Probably on their side, give them the best case. You earn a fucking lottery for some reason and you travel the world. It's going to end at some point. Then Dhruv's doing kicks in is very important. When things go bad and you don't have any capacity, you start doing the worst of shit because that's the only thing you can do. Which is things like drugs. Because that's the most accessible and the cheaper thing to do than traveling. The problem there is that when things go bad within those decisions, you need some people to get you out of it to be a happy life, right? When you evaluate your life across 30 years, if you are not able to get out of bad shit things,
Was saving this for reply. Shout out to Abdul, his first. Okay, with that. Starting speech in 3, 2, 1. I know Sehaj gives really good replies to this, but please listen to me. The first response I have is that go back to their speeches, they never explain why drugs are bad. If the worst case is that drugs are bad or whatever, I'd say take it. Do LSD for 5 years and die if that's what you want to do. You're deriving happiness out of it at the end of it for 5 years. Because we think the outweighing harm of you living a redundant life where you have to commute aimlessly and fill in Excel sheets for no goddamn reason, only to take that one Bali trip 10 years down the line is literally not worth it. The second thing I want to claim is their entire idea about, mother being whatever, moving away from you, etc. The reason why the need for a coping mechanism that strong exists is because life is just that bad. Go back to our characterization of life is suffering. Which means if on Delta we are able to decrease that suffering, the need for you to rely on those coping metrics also decrease. Which means again, and this is a reverse burden on them as well. Which means if you're an average voter, it probably means you were scoring what? 10 on 25, so your mother was probably slapping you then. When you didn't get into IIT and you got into probably a lower tier college, your mother probably slapped you then as well. Which means you've constantly disappointed your mother throughout your life. If your life is just 30 years for that matter, I don't see why disappointing her just a little bit more is something that's just so bad, and this is just me assuming the absolute worst over here. Which means the need for coping mechanisms are just so much more on their side of the house. And I could posit if taking drugs is illegal and capitalist society is that bad and corporate life is that bad, your life would take them more on their side of the house anyway, and you'd want to engage on these really bad things. 3 clashes in this debate then. First on time, second on agency, and third on capacity. I want to deal with capacity first. Because their entire case is, but you wouldn't have money to go to Peru. The issue is, the entire societal structure forces you to think that you don't have capacity. These trips are actually cheap. A round trip to Philippines is 6,000 rupees. You worked in McDonald's for a month, you earn 10,000 rupees. But the issue is this, we are being told to go to these jobs for do these 9 to 5 work, and then with our family, which also is just additional baggage, by the way, all of it, like your wife, your kids, etc. The reason why you need them in the long term is precisely why your life is 70 years goddamn long, and I think that's way too long. Which means at that point in time, the capacity that you have to probably go on these trips or experience life exists because the threshold of you opting into that excitement is less. What they take is an elitist view. So probably somebody, and this is what Divyansh says in the first minute of his speech. So if you're really rich, obviously the way you're going to derive this excitement is less. But for the sake of the debate where this is an average person that we're talking about, I don't see if it's utility that you derive out of flexing this to your friends who also belong to the same tier structure or whatever. I think just going on these small experiences and doing all of this is something that can still be done. But if there's some thrill that you're getting out of this, etc., we think that's sustaining in nature, as I said, that because there are just so much more experiences. The fact that we can derive utility out of debating again and again after each round, and one good speech that you give and you see why the utility of it matters at the end of the day, we think that symmetrically applies to our side of the house as well. Which means then there's diminishing marginal utility, whatever, on their side of the house, which is basically that you reach a peak and then it's just downhill, which means you probably reach your peak at 35. Their idea is your life starts at 35. But why does it need to is my question. Why can't it start at 21? When you decide that, fuck fuck this, I don't want to do it. I want to go someplace else. I want to do this. I want to dance. I want to take up Bharatanatyam, which I left 10 years ago. Still sad about it. Anyway, the second clash then is just on agency. I think short there's like a limited amount of agency that you have to have. So even if society is pushing down narratives onto you, for example, you being a plumber's son, etc. The comparative is this. So you see your dad working or whatever, and then you want to lead an exciting life. I don't know. You see water, you understand I like water, and then you opt into swimming, and you probably want to take up swimming, and you derive some like happiness out of it for all that time matter, and that's the excitement that is at the end of the day. Lastly, then on time, I just think there's a lot more time that's being wasted. If our framing on life being like suffering, lottery of birth, religion, bad things, war, bullets, everything. So which means at that point in time, if we are just on the comparative able to decrease that and just condense it, and there are preemptive responses in second to mitigate why you are likely to not opt into jail, because you know your life is just 30 years, which means you would want to just expand the amount of value from that pleasure that you can derive. For those reasons.
Sign your name. We need to find your best speaker from everyone. Don't write speaker's name, write your speaker. Write the speaker. Give to
Recording.